feel the electricity in the room, or that feeling, I just to be present and to hold space for that person, both in the moment and then also like reviewing it is powerful and incredible. But I think people forget how powerful music is because it's ubiquitous, and we don't even realize that it's being used on you all the time. You go into a grocery store, there's a certain kind of music that they're playing, and you'll notice they're not playing this other kind of music, and there's a reason. And if you go into, different clothing stores, they all have different kinds of music, and it lets you know, do I belong here or do I not belong here? Yeah, and it's being, commercials, it's being used on you all the time. And because it's so ubiquitous, we forget that this conscious use of it is really important.
That's fabulous. And, again, music is all over our house, and I grew up with a lot of music, but I even believe when we speak, it's music, we all have a certain way of speaking, and, you get used to it, or something is jarring and you don't want to hear it. You're right. Music is all around us. I mean, the birds are chirping when I wake up. It is. And I've read a lot and actually seen a lot of information about music as healing, the vibrations and the frequency of music. So it wasn't really surprising to me when you said that you were crying, because that happens to me as well. And I wanted to also bring up the fact that you talked earlier about this dying and rebirth. And I completely believe in that. I believe that something is happening. I was also pregnant. I also had a few children, so I know, at least I know my own feelings, and I really did feel like there was this act of letting go. You're right, to create that space. There's a new space being created. So I think everything you said was just so powerful, and I recommend everybody to check out Maura's website and to learn more about her. We're still on, but there's so much more that we're going to be able to discuss in the next 20 more minutes that we have together.
Yeah, I always like to point out to people that really having a child is the first thing in your life that you can't undo. When you get married, you can get divorced. You buy a house, you can sell it. You start a job, you can change jobs, you can go back to school. You can't unhave a child. And I think the weight of that, as I was realizing that, was like, holy cow, like I've just been I've been taking my life seriously, but like there are very few things in your life that are so permanent, I should say, or so altering for your experience.
Yes. And I did have a question, though, as you were talking. Was your partner completely on board? How did you navigate this? Was it primarily you were the leader and he was, and you were consulting with him? Can you explain the dynamics of that and how you also work with your clients about that?
Sure. So my partner's great. He was on board as far as, it's your body, whatever you want to do, and I'll support you in that. And so he was there with me. I was definitely in the lead, though. I definitely, we take in information very differently. And so I would read, these big, thick books about the anatomy of birth. And then, I had a few other books that I was reading, and he's like, reading articles online at work. And so we weren't spending a ton of time practicing together. And for that first birth, we didn't have a doula either. So we kind of went in, like I said, our circle of care was not completed. We didn't have the continuous care that we ended up needing. And I just didn't understand, being in relationship and having him as my only support. There came a point where he needed to eat, he needed to sleep, he needed to take care of himself so he could take care of me, but I didn't want him to leave and he didn't want to leave. And so that's where a doula would have really come in handy, just on a physical basic level. But a doula would have also been really nice too, because he and I were going to that space never having been through a birth before, and a doula at the very least has lots of experience with you. And ultimately what led me to get the epidural in my first birth was looking at him, and he had bags under his eyes down to his cheeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's as tired as I'm feeling. Why don't I just give this up? And this is getting harder. You know, if I had had a doula, we could have said, you go sleep. And she could have, you know, helped rally me through and just kind of been a little bit more like, okay, are you wanting the epidural for real? Are you wanting the epidural just right now? Let's see. And let's try this, you know, kind of bring some creation, some ideas when I did not have the brain space for that. So the second time around, we had more support. We had a music therapist that we were consulting with. We had a person coming as the music therapist, and we had a doula. And then we also had both attended an independent birth class. And I remember him being there was one day where each couple got an assignment to look at a certain intervention. And we had picked Pitocin because that was one that we had in our first birth. And he was just like amazed at all the things that can happen with Pitocin, and like when you really should be using it. and knowing that it hadn't happened like that for us, I think that was a big awakening moment for him as well. So ironically, you know, our doula came and we practiced birth several times. Ironically, the birth went so fast she didn't make it, but she was still there, you know, whenever after the baby was born and everybody's paying attention to the baby, taking pictures, that she was there to give me a drink of water, put some lavender oil on me and make sure I was okay, hold my hand, you know, because you kind of, and this adrenaline, you're processing through all these hormones. She was there to be present with me for that. And I so many of my clients after the birth especially will say, well, we thought we were hiring you for the person who is birthing, usually whoever identifies as the woman, whoever, I hate to use gender specific language, but really you were so helpful to both of us. And some partners or fathers will go on and say, well, actually, guys, the doula is for the father. And really just to take the pressure, it takes the pressure off them. They don't have to remember everything. They don't have to be the coach, quote unquote, when they've never even had a menstrual cramp. They don't have to have all this weight on them. They can just be coming into their transition as well, because even though the baby's not coming out of them, they're going through a transition. They're watching their partner do something that they maybe never have seen before, and to have somebody there to say, no, this is okay, hey, here's, press on this acupressure point, that will help relieve some pain, can you rub her back? And so I do, when I attend births, I do a combination of people managing and like paying attention to where that partner is comfortable, what is important for them right now, and helping fill in the gaps or helping them do that. So I've had some partners that had me twiddling my thumbs and just working the music in the corners, and I'm getting them, you know, barf buckets and towels because he's all on it. He like, and I've had some where I did all the massaging, because the thing that was really bothering Dad was that he was in charge of the email list and he hadn't put that together. And so for him to have time to put that together in the corner while she was taken care of gave him so much peace. And just, I never know which end somebody's going to be on until we're in that moment, but honoring that and being non-judgmental about it and making space for that, but also verbalizing invitations whenever, because there are just times when that partner needs to be, I can't be that part. I don't have that connection as strongly, even if we're close. It's not the same relationship as you have with your partner. So I kind of help people understand ways that they can capitalize on that and ways that they can make sure that everybody's prepared and feeling supported.
Great. I had some other questions actually while you were speaking. One, I just wanted you to define like doula and midwife for anyone who's listening that may not, you know, maybe young mothers, you know, who are not aware of all their options. So maybe you could just spend a couple of minutes talking about that. And I had something else. When you explained that also, could you explain if the births are at home, or are you going to a center, or are there other options?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So in the United States, where you can birth really differs state to state and even region to region. I'm in the St. Louis area. Home birth is legal in the state of Missouri. And being in a metropolitan area, it's a lot easier to find a midwife. And so women here, families here, have a lot of options. There's also birth centers in the area. So there's a choice between home birth center with a midwife, or a hospital birth. Just across the river in Illinois, home birth is legal there as well, but there are certain guidelines and restrictions around the work of midwives that they have to have some kind of relationship with a quote unquote like supervising type of OB, which is a little bit silly in my opinion. And it means that the Illinois side of our river is a little bit more, I mean, there's metropolitan areas, there's no birth centers. There are hospitals that are very unmedicated friendly. There are actually hospitals with midwives as well. There's no independent birth centers, and there aren't on the Illinois side doctors supporting midwives. So home birth on this close to the Missouri borderline is not accessible for people who want to have a home birth in Illinois, which is silly. It's 30 minutes. Like, it's so silly to not be able to birth in your home because you're 30 minutes away from the next state. In Chicago area, of course, Chicago's a much bigger city. They do have those relationships between some OBs and midwives so that you can have a home birth in the Chicago area. So the difference between a midwife and a doula is you could almost compare. A midwife actually might be better compared to an OB, because the midwife takes care of the medical piece of your birth. They are trained in what we call physiologic birth, which is knowing and understanding when to watch and wait. They tend not to use many medications. If you're birthing in a birth center at home, obviously there's not going to be any like pain relieving medications. If something were to happen and you would need Pitocin, you would just transfer to a hospital. Usually that is not an ambulance ride. That is usually a ride in the car, just to clarify for people. But depending, midwives can also have different trainings and different backgrounds. So there's certified nurse midwives, which kind of come through, they have like a master's in nursing. So they come through kind of that allopathic medical model. And so they'll have a slightly different perspective. And then there's certified, I think they're practicing midwives, which have not been through the medical system at all, but they have, I mean, they both have very robust trainings and apprenticeships. And, you know, if you're a certified midwife of either type, you are no slouch. You have been through all kinds of training. So they're there to watch, you know, heart tones. They're there to, they're usually not as liberal with checks for dilation, but they can kind of manage and watch. It's almost a watch and wait approach, whereas sometimes a medical approach with an OB will be, you know, you're on a much maybe shorter timeline. We want to get you in here and out of here. We might use Pitocin or even a C-section based on things that really aren't medical need. And there's lots of evidence for that. You know, just our C-section rate with OBs is over 30% in the US, where we know countries where the care is mostly taken care of by midwives and even in homes is under 10%. So a midwife, you're most likely, you know, you have to be a low risk person to use a midwife, but you know, that's based on the model that most people who have low risk pregnancies can birth at home or wherever they need to birth. So a doula is a completely different training. It's a completely different headspace. Midwives often have come to midwifery work through doula work as well. But a doula is there for the continuous care. Your midwife would be in and out, checking on you, seeing how you're doing. And then if you're not in need of them at that moment, then they will go on about their day, take care of themselves. A doula will have a much smaller caseload, but they're planning to be there with you from the time you call them till after that birth is done, except for extenuating circumstances, of course. We all have our human limits. But as a doula, I'm not checking heart tones. I don't know how to check your cervical dilation. I don't know. I can see sometimes signs on the outside of the body that things are changing and progressing, but that's out of my scope of practice to make any kind of assessment along those lines. But I'm there to help